My fiancé texted me at 4:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. In the world of high-stakes finance, 4:14 p.m. is a graveyard hour. The markets are closing, the adrenaline that sustains you through the morning is evaporating, and the exhaustion begins to seep into your bones like cold, black ink. I was staring at a spreadsheet, a sea of red and green numbers that usually meant everything to me, but suddenly they meant nothing. The text was 7 words long, 26 characters, including the spaces. I found someone else. Deal with it. It took her 4 years to build a life with me. It took her 4 years of shared dinners, holiday flights, and whispered promises to weave herself into the fabric of my existence. And yet it took her exactly 3 seconds to fire me like a redundant, low-level contractor. There was no, "I'm sorry." No, "we need to talk." No, "I've been unhappy for a while." Just a cold, clinical dismissal. A statement of fact, followed by command. I stared at the screen until the light dimmed, the glowing pixels burning those words into my retinas. Deal with it. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness or a confession of guilt. It was an order. She expected me to crumble. She expected the frantic phone calls, the weeping, the desperate, "Who is he?" and the pathetic, "What did I do wrong?" She had mistaken my stability for a lack of options. She thought my silence over the years was a cage she could leave open, believing I was too domesticated, too safe to ever fly away. In that moment, I felt a strange, chilling sensation in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak, at least not the kind you read about in poems. It was clarity. It was the sound of a structural beam finally snapping in a building you already knew was condemned. I picked up my phone. My fingers were steady, steadier than they had been during the 2022 market crash. I typed one single word to end a 4-year investment. Finally. I didn't wait for the typing bubble to appear. I didn't wait for the inevitable explosion of her ego when she realized I wasn't going to play the victim. I placed the phone face down on my mahogany desk and looked out at the city. The rain was blurring the edges of the skyscrapers, turning New York into a charcoal watercolor, cold and indifferent. I am 36 years old. I work in finance. I understand the cold math of assets and liabilities. And as I sat there in the gathering gloom of my office, I realized I'd been over-leveraged in a relationship that had been fundamentally bankrupt for a long time. She was beautiful, yes. She was sharp, decisive, and possessed a laugh that could cut through the noise of a crowded gala. For 1,460 days, I had told myself her cruelty was just honesty. I told myself her total financial dependence on me was just a transitional phase. I had spent 4 years paying for the privilege of being insulted in my own home. But the contract was over. The deal with it clause had been activated. I didn't pack a bag that evening. I didn't pour a drink or call a friend event. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint banking portal. My heart rate stayed at a cool 65 beats per minute. I wasn't an angry ex-lover anymore. I was a liquidator. The precision of what I was about to do felt almost like a religious experience. Every subscription, every insurance policy, every invisible thread that connected my hard-earned labor to her comfort, I was going to sever them all. Not out of malice, but out of alignment with the new reality she had just created. She wanted me to deal with it. Fine. I was going to deal with it like a professional. I didn't go home that night. Going home meant walking into a space filled with her scent, her overpriced candles, and the lingering echoes of a 4-year lie. Instead, I stayed in my office. The janitors passed by, their vacuums humming in the hallway, unaware that a private execution was taking place in room 3602. In finance, we have a term called de-risking. It's the process of reducing exposure to an asset that has become toxic. As I sat there, illuminated only by the blue light of 3 monitors, I realized she was the most toxic asset I had ever carried. I opened a spreadsheet. I'm a man of lists. On the left, every account, utility, and service I funded. On the right, the date of termination. Step 1, the shared pulse. The joint checking account. It was the heart of our household, pumping my salary into her lifestyle. I didn't drain it to zero. That would be sloppy, a move for an amateur. I calculated the exact amount of her freelance contributions over the last month, subtracted her share of the pending bills, and moved the rest to a private offshore account she couldn't see. I left her exactly $412. Enough for a week of groceries, but not enough for a lawyer's retainer. Step 2. The digital ghost. The family plan. She loved her iPhone 15 Pro Max, the one I bought her for her birthday. I logged into the carrier portal. Remove device. Terminate line. I watched the confirmation screen buffer for 3 seconds. 3 seconds to turn her lifeline into a glass and metal paperweight. Next, the streaming services. Netflix, HBO, Disney+, Spotify. I changed the passwords and hit log out of all devices. I imagined her in the apartment, trying to watch a show to distract herself from her new lover, only to find a wrong password screen. A small, digital door slamming in her face. Step 3. The safety net. This was the most delicate part. The car insurance. She was a listed driver on my policy. If she got into an accident tomorrow, I would be liable. I called the 24-hour concierge. "I'd like to remove a driver," I said. My voice was as flat as a dial tone. "Sir, is the driver aware?" the agent asked. "The engagement has been terminated," I replied. "She is no longer my responsibility." Understood. Effective at midnight. I moved through the list with the efficiency of a machine. The gym membership at Equinox, canceled. The Amazon Prime account, archived. The cloud storage where all our photos lived. I downloaded what I needed and hit wipe. I wasn't doing this to be petty. Petty is emotional. Petty is wanting a reaction. I didn't want a reaction. I wanted distance. I wanted to return her to the state I found her in 4 years ago. Independent and responsible for her own survival. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from the smart lock at our apartment. User, fiancé unlocked. She was home. She was probably looking for me. Or perhaps she was already texting to someone else from our bed. She didn't know yet that the Wi-Fi would be gone by morning. She didn't know that the grocery delivery scheduled for tomorrow had been canceled. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the tension in my shoulders began to dissolve. I was 36, and I was losing a fiancé, a wedding, and about $30,000 in non-refundable deposits. It was the best deal I had ever made. I looked at the last item on my spreadsheet, the lease. That was the nuclear option, but I would save that for morning. A professional never plays all his cards in the first round. The first wave of reality hit her at 6:15 a.m. I know this because my backup email received the automated alerts. Alert: your Xfinity service has been disconnected. Alert: payment method declined for Apple iCloud. Alert: delivery canceled for Whole Foods. In the quiet of my temporary sanctuary, a friend's guest suite in Tribeca, I watched the digital fallout. I didn't feel the rush of a bully. I felt the satisfaction of an architect watching a faulty structure finally succumb to gravity. Then the phone started. Not text this time. Calls. One after another, vibrating against the marble countertop like a dying insect. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. In finance, when a client defaults, you don't argue with them over the phone. You let the system handle the foreclosure. By 9 a.m., she had figured out how to use a neighbor's Wi-Fi or a friend's hotspot. The emails began. "What is wrong with you? My phone is dead. I can't even call an Uber. You're being insane. This is beyond petty. It's dangerous. Call me now." I sipped my coffee. Dangerous? No. Dangerous was the 4 years I spent building a foundation on her shifting sands. Dangerous was the $150,000 wedding I almost signed my life away to. What she was experiencing wasn't danger. It was just the sudden, cold absence of my labor. By noon, the tone shifted. The damsel in distress act had failed, so she pivoted to the victim of abuse. "This is financial abuse, and my father is horrified. You can't just cut a woman off like this. I have rights. We were engaged. That's a legal contract. My lawyer will be in touch." I smiled. The mention of a lawyer is usually meant to intimidate. To a man in finance, it's just a request for a more formal audit. An hour later, my office line rang. My assistant, Sarah, sounded hesitant. "Sir, there's a Mr. Aristos on the line. He claims to be representing... Well, he says it's regarding a domestic dispute." Put him through, Sarah. Mr. Aristos had the voice of a man who practiced his authoritative tone in the mirror. Mr. Sterling, he began, my client is currently stranded in an apartment with no utilities, no communication, and no access to shared funds. This is a highly irregular and, frankly, actionable escalation. We are prepared to file for emergency support and a restraining order regarding your financial interference. I didn't interrupt. I let him exhaust his script. In a negotiation, the person who speaks the most reveals the most weakness. Mr. Aristos, I said, my voice steady, I assume you have a copy of our marriage certificate? A pause. Well, no. As you know, the wedding was. I assume you have a copy of a signed cohabitation agreement or a prenuptial support clause. The law recognizes implied contracts in long term. The law recognizes assets. I cut in, my tone turning to ice. The apartment lease is in my name only. The utilities are in my name only. The funds moved from the joint account were my direct deposits from my employer, minus her documented contributions, which I left for her. As of 4:14 p.m. yesterday, the engagement was terminated via text message by your client. She announced a new relationship. She ended the implied contract herself. I leaned back, looking at the city below. If she is stranded, it is because she chose to burn the bridge while she was still standing in the middle of it. If you'd like to file a motion, go ahead. But I'll be countersuing for the return of the engagement ring, an $18,000 asset, and a full audit of the household expenses she owes me for the last fiscal year. The silence on the other end lasted 5 full seconds. It was the sound of a lawyer realizing his client had lied about her leverage. We would prefer to resolve this amicably, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Good, I replied. Then tell your client to stop calling me. Any further communication will be in writing. And tell her she has 48 hours to vacate my property before I involve the sheriff for trespassing. I hung up. I felt a strange, cold thrill. For years, I had been the safe guy, the boring provider, the man who absorbed her sharpness so she could stay soft. But the safe guy was gone. The provider had closed the shop. Chapter 4. The Ghost in the Apartment. Suggested visual. A tracking shot through a silent, slightly disheveled apartment. Dust motes dance in slivers of sunlight. A half-eaten bowl of cereal on the counter. Empty spaces on shelves where personal items used to be. The soundtrack is sparse, almost ambient, with distant city sounds muted by closed windows. The call to the sheriff's department was a formality, a preemptive measure. I didn't actually expect her to stay. She thrived on attention. On conflict, she could turn into drama. A direct legal threat from me, through her lawyer, would force her hand. But I needed to go back. Not to confront her, the time for that was long past, but to reclaim what was mine and to assess the damage. My lease on the Tribeca guest suite was temporary. My life, however, needed a permanent address. I chose to go on a Friday evening, knowing she'd likely be out. She had always preferred the buzz of happy hour to the quiet of our shared home, especially if someone else was paying. I drove my car, a sensible German sedan she often mocked for being too corporate, through the darkening streets. Each familiar turn, each street lamp, felt like a faded photograph. Pulling up to the curb, I saw her car. A borrowed one, older, with a dent in the rear bumper. Not the flashy SUV I had bought her for her last birthday. That, I presumed, was parked at her new man's place. The thought was devoid of anger, just a detached observation of shifting realities. I entered the apartment building. The air in the elevator was thick with the scent of her expensive perfume, mingling with something vaguely stale. My stomach did not knot. My hands did not tremble. I was a professional entering a crime scene, not a lover returning to a broken home. The apartment door opened with a familiar click. The silence inside was immediate, deafening. It was the kind of silence that screams the absence of life, not the presence of peace. She hadn't trashed the place. Not physically, anyway. The living room was exactly as we'd left it. Cushions askew on the minimalist sofa, a magazine splayed open on the coffee table. But there was a hollowness to it, like a stage after the actors had gone home. My eyes scanned the room, cataloging. My watch, which I had forgotten on the nightstand, was gone. Her collection of art books was gone from the shelves I'd built. My expensive French press, a gift from my parents, was missing from the kitchen. This wasn't random theft. This was a statement. A petty, predictable act of defiance disguised as taking what's rightfully hers. I pulled out my phone and began to systematically photograph every room. The pristine walls, the unmarred hardwood floors, the empty spaces where my belongings once stood. Evidence. Always evidence. I walked into the bedroom. Her side of the closet was bare. The dressers were empty. The space felt lighter, less cluttered, more mine. Even as I was preparing to leave it, on my side, my suits hung in military precision, a testament to the order she often resented. I methodically packed my clothes, my documents, my few remaining electronics. The things that were undeniably, legally, exclusively mine. I didn't linger over the memories. A specific sweater she once loved, a book we read together. They were just objects now, devoid of the emotional currency they once held. This wasn't an emotional extraction. It was an inventory. As I zipped my last bag, I noticed something on the nightstand, a small, silver picture frame. It was a photo of us from our engagement party. Both of us beaming, oblivious to the cracks already forming beneath the surface. I picked it up. Her face, once so captivating, now seemed to wear a permanent smirk. I found someone else. Deal with it. I took the frame, removed the picture, and tore it in half. The silver frame, however, was mine, a gift from my mother. I placed it carefully in my bag. I left my key on the kitchen counter, next to a wilting plant she had forgotten to water. It was a final, silent declaration. No grand exit, no angry note. Just absence. A clean, clinical break. As I closed the apartment door behind me, the familiar click echoed with a new kind of finality. It wasn't a goodbye. It was an emancipation. Silence has a weight. For weeks, the silence from her side had been heavy, a pressure cooker of unread emails and blocked numbers. But eventually, the pressure has to vent. She didn't call. She didn't email her lawyer. She did what people who have lost their leverage always do. She showed up, hoping that a face-to-face encounter would reactivate the old emotional neural pathways she used to control me. I was returning from the gym, a habit I'd reclaimed along with my time. The air was crisp, the kind of evening where every breath feels like a reset. I saw her car before I saw her. It was parked illegally near the entrance of my new building. She was leaning against the fender, looking small, looking tired. In our 4 years together, I'd been trained to respond to that look. It was the save me signal. It usually cost me an apology, a dinner, or a wire transfer. Julian, she said as I approached. No hello. Just my name, spoken with a practiced tremor. You shouldn't be here, I said. I didn't stop walking until I was exactly 6 feet away. I didn't invite her in. I didn't offer a hand. I stood like a man observing a stranger at a crosswalk. I just wanted 5 minutes, she said, her eyes scanning my face for a crack, a sign of the safe Julian she remembered. I think I deserve that at least. After 4 years. You used your 5 minutes when you sent the text, I replied. Actually, you used 26 characters of it. You were very efficient. She let out a short, sharp laugh, the old defensive mechanism. You're still doing this? This robot act? Julian, I was angry. I was emotional. I didn't mean for you to actually burn the world down. I thought we'd talk. I thought finally it was just you being sarcastic. It wasn't sarcasm, I said, and for the first time, I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. It was relief. You gave me the exit I was too disciplined to take myself. You didn't just find someone else. You found me a way out. The mask slipped then. The damsel vanished, and the sharpness returned. You're cruel, she spat. You left me with nothing. No phone, no insurance, no way to pay the rent. People are asking me what happened, and I have to tell them that the man I was going to marry turned out to be a sociopath who cares more about his spreadsheets than a human being. Consequences often feel like cruelty to people who aren't used to them, I said. I adjusted my gym bag. You assumed I would subsidize your new relationship. You assumed my respect for you was an unconditional credit line. It wasn't. It was a mutual agreement. You terminated it. The other guy, He was a mistake, she whispered, stepping closer. The scent of her perfume, the one I used to buy her every Christmas, hit me. It felt like a ghost trying to touch a living man. He's gone, Julian. He couldn't handle the mess. I realized what I lost. Can we just sit down? One coffee. Just talk. I looked at her, and for a fleeting second, I saw the woman I loved in 2022. But then I saw the text message again, burned into my memory in glowing blue pixels. Deal with it. No, I said. She blinked, stunned. No? Just like that. Trust is like a glass sculpture, I said. You didn't just drop it. You threw it against a wall to see if it would bounce. It didn't. And I have no interest in gluing the shards back together just to cut my hands on them for the next 40 years. I stepped around her. I'm not angry, and I'm not punishing you, I said over my shoulder. I'm just aligned. You wanted to be with someone else. I've granted you that wish. Now you just have to deal with the cost of it. I walked into the lobby. The heavy glass door hissed shut behind me, sealing out the noise, the perfume, and the chaos. I didn't look back to see if she was crying or if she was reaching for her phone to call someone else. I took the elevator to the 22nd floor. I walked into my quiet, minimalist apartment. I poured a glass of water. My hands were perfectly steady. That night, she sent one last message from a burner app. I never thought you would actually leave. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the thread. She was right about one thing. I was a man of logic, and the logic was simple. If the value of the relationship is zero, the investment must be zero. I slept for 8 hours. I woke up at dawn. The sun was rising over the East River, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to manage someone else's storm. I just had to live my life, and that was enough. They say that experience is a brutal teacher. She gives the test first and a lesson afterward. It's been 6 months since that Tuesday at 4:14 p.m. In the beginning, the silence in my new apartment felt like an accusation. I would catch myself listening for the sound of her keys in the lock or the sharp, impatient tone of her voice asking why I hadn't ordered dinner. But slowly, that phantom noise faded, replaced by something I hadn't realized I'd lost, my own frequency. I heard through a mutual friend that she moved out of the city. She's crashing with a cousin, working a job she once mocked, and selling the designer bags I bought her just to keep up with the interest on her credit cards. The irony isn't lost on me. She used to call me frugal. She used to roll her eyes when I talked about emergency funds and long-term stability. Now, she's learning that living in the moment is a luxury provided by the people who are actually planning for the future. I didn't feel a surge of victory when I heard that. I didn't feel the need to gloat. When you truly move on, the other person's downfall is just as uninteresting as their success. They're simply outside the perimeter. I lost about $40,000 in that breakup. Deposits for a wedding that never happened, legal fees, and items she borrowed and never returned. In my 20s, that loss would have kept me awake at night. At 36, I look at it differently. I call it tuition. I paid $40,000 to learn that loyalty cannot be bought, and that providing for someone is not the same as being respected by them. I paid $40,000 to avoid a divorce 10 years from now that would have cost me half of everything in my relationship with my future children. By that math, I got a bargain. My life is smaller now, but it's sturdier. I spend my weekends hiking alone or meeting friends I haven't seen in years. The ones she found boring because they didn't feed her need for drama. I've realized that peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the absence of the wrong noise. I reread that final text sometimes, not to hurt myself, but to remember the moment I stopped being a victim of my own hope. I found someone else. Deal with it. She was right. I did deal with it. I dealt with it by removing the person who didn't want to be there. I dealt with it by reclaiming my labor, my money, and my dignity. I am no longer the safe Julian who absorbs everyone else's storm. I am a man who understands that my presence is a privilege, not a default setting. And if you don't value the foundation, you don't get to live under the roof. The sun is setting now over the Hudson. The city is turning into that familiar watercolor of gray and gold. I'm going to finish this coffee, close my laptop, and enjoy the silence. Because for the first time in 4 years, the silence belongs to me.